I just got this model about a week ago. It's of the Arcadia, which is one of the smaller P&O liners of the 1950s. It was launched in 1954, the same year I was born. It was launched about a month after Queen Elizabeth II's Royal Yacht Britannia was launched in the same shipyard, John Brown Yard, Glasgow, Scotland. There was a bit of delay to finish this because the Royal Yacht had precedence in getting the workmen to finish it, ready for the Queen and the Duke to use. But then they got onto this one fairly quickly. Now there's a bit of a personal history with this ship. I've been on it several times, never sailed on it, but I've been on board because my grandmother used to live on this ship for 12 years. From 1956 to 1968 when she died in Wellington. And she just lived on the ship and sailed around the world. Every 2 years it would come into Melbourne and she would call my mother and order my mother and my father and me, which naturally I was still at school, another day off from school, good, and went down to the ship. We were expected to join my grandmother at the captain's day room for cocktails at 11:30 in the morning. Naturally, I couldn't have cocktails, but I was served coloured drinks that looked like cocktails. Then, about an hour later, we would then go down to the main first-class restaurant and we'll sit at the captain's table for lunch. Then, for the afternoon, my grandmother and my parents would have a knick-knack chat session with each other. And then one of the junior officers would then take over and take me around this ship from top to bottom. So you get an understanding from all this how my interests in ships have grown when I was young. Remembering in the 1950s and 60s, we always went down to Station Pier in Melbourne to see families or friends going from New Zealand to England or Australia to England or vice versa. So the result is we always went down to see people going on or off on any of the cruise ships. In those days, they weren't cruise ships, they were passenger liners. They were the true passenger liners. And the result is it'll be similar to what our generation or the younger generation is. We all go down to Tullamarine to see people in and out. That's normal for us nowadays. In those days, it was always down to Station Pier. These ships, when they did come in, they're only about 40,000 tonnes, which is really not big by today's standards, but in those days they were big. And it was always excitement. And at Station Pier, they could hold 4 of these 40,000 tonne liners at any one time. Nowadays, because the ships are so much larger, they can only take about 2 or 3 ships because one would take up one side. For example, the Queen Mary II, that would take up the entire length of Station Pier. And then you'll have a smaller cruise ship next to it, and then the Spirit of Tasmania further down on the other side of the Station Pier. Anyway, back to Arcadia. I bought this model recently. It was in a very bad state. And as you can see, I've already started work on it at the bow, and I've cleaned up the decks, so you can see the comparison, how dirty the decks are with the dust, and then how clean it is up at this end. Plus, the fellow that built it, he must have sailed on it for a while, or must have sailed out here as a migrant and had fond memories of it, but his research is not good. He's made a lot of whoopsies and mistakes, and naturally I'm having to correct the mistakes as I go along from the bow. I'm noticing having to rearrange the entire, what they call derrick booms for cargo, because these old passenger ships used to also carry cargo along with their passengers. And that's how the shipping companies made a lot of money. Remembering in those days, flying the Royal Mail out to Australia or vice versa was very expensive to post when it had to go air pavillon by airmail. It was cheaper to go by sea and would take only about 4 weeks for the mail to get back to England or vice versa. So most of these liners, P&O, Orient Line, that's how they made their profits, through the Royal Mail contracts between Australia and Great Britain. Cunard was the same with their transatlantic runs. In fact, Cunard still do it to this day with the Queen Mary 2. She is classed and classified as a Royal Mail ship. All these liners of the past were also RMS, Royal Mail ships. And that's how they made their money. Passengers was just merely icing on the wedding cake, literally. It was just the extra money. And that's how they survived and did very well until about the 1970s, when the 10-pounder Pommy started to come out by air to Australia. That pretty much put the nail on the head of any of these passenger liners. Many of the passenger liners became cruise ships, but they were ageing. And then the cruise industry started to wither away by the 70s, early 80s, until the resurgence began in the 1990s to the cruise ships we see of today. Cruise ships today do not carry mail. As I said before, the only ship that does carry mail officially is the Queen Mary 2 when she does the North Atlantic run as a passenger liner. Even the bow's incorrect. So I thought, right, all right. But I know what I'm doing. That's the thing, you had years of building model ships, you know what to do and how to rectify it and get it sorted out. It's always been a static model. That's one of the original photos of the ship. It's obviously a photograph on a photograph because of the reflection of the water. That's a crumpled up piece of photograph. So it's a bit of a misgiving there. But the guy's done some good bits building this model. His detailing is very good, but he hasn't done his research properly on where everything's laid out, and a lot of things are not aligned correctly, and there's some missed points, and I think, all right, well, we know what to do. But it's the same scale. Arcadia actually is the same scale as the big 4 models, 1 in 100 scale, which was remarkable, but just a lot of detailing will have to be rectified to see if we can make it sail. It's hollow inside, so we can make it as a radar control model ship. But at this stage I just want to get the detailing right, get the bow sorted out, because the shape of the bow is incorrect. It should be what they call a semi-V shape, not like that, which is called clipper ship bow. Like our clipper ships, the Cutty Sark and the Thermopylae, the only passenger liners that had a clipper-shaped bow is the Queen Mary 2, the QE2, the former Queen Elizabeth II, and the Normandy, the famous French superliner of the 1930s. For example, this is a picture of the Arcadia. Look how the bow is shaped. It's more like a V shape. But when the waves go around it, it gives a false impression that it is a clipper bow, but it isn't. It's a V-shaped or half-rounded shaped bow at the water level. And that's what this is meant to be. So that's a big project of the future to work on and sorting out the bow.